Hello and welcome to another episode of The Living Philosophy. Today we're going to discuss what enlightenment is. Now recently I talked about why I'm not enlightened. I had a video explaining that. But I said I would revisit the idea of the difference between enlightenment and mysticism. And this is one of the core ideas in Jed McKenna's spiritual enlightenment, the damnedest things. And I think it's a really important and interesting distinction. Because enlightenment actually turns out to be a very, very simple kind of thing that I think we can all wrap our head around the idea of quite easily. Whereas mysticism is that exotic spice that we see come through in the theosophist kind of writings that blossomed into the New Age. So things like the importing the Hindu ideas, the serpent power and all that. And so mysticism comes across more as this idea of the chakras and connecting to the universe and that universal power and opening the third eye and all the different powers and supernatural abilities that are ascribed to the great gurus and yogis, such as clairvoyance or extrasensory perception or astral body projection and all of these sorts of things of different levels of powers and tapping into higher levels of consciousness and ultimately the experience of unity consciousness, of that bliss of the unity of the experiencing of the universe as one, as everything is being totally interconnected and that being a completely overwhelmingly blissful experience. Now that's what Jed McKenna calls mysticism. That's where so much of New Age thought leads, and that's what we're kind of fueled with. That's the thing that gives us so much desire, that makes us want to progress towards that. But for Jed McKenna, enlightenment is something entirely different. And something that I found really interesting in Jed McKenna is there's almost more of a Western ancient philosophical thing about him than an Eastern thing about him. Now he loves the Bhagavad Gita. He's really coming out of that Eastern tradition, but he's also, it's much more almost connected in with Platonism, what he's talking about. So what is enlightenment? So enlightenment is best illustrated by the Matrix, I think. Enlightenment is waking up. And what does waking up mean? It means realizing that all of this is just a game. All of this is just a play. And he uses a lot of different analogies for this, but just imagine that all the world's a stage, as Shakespeare says, and we're all just actors playing our parts in it. And who you think you are, and what you think your role is in this world, and what you think is going on in this world, everything you take seriously is just a character on stage, playing around with other characters on stage. We don't know we're on stage, and we define all these ego roles, and we think, oh, I'm important, or I'm special, or I'm this, or I'm that, and it's all just, it's like the scales dropping from your eyes and just realizing, oh, none of this matters. None of this has any intrinsic meaning. I guess the Matrix is a great way of looking at it. Like when Neo wakes up out of the Matrix, when he's born into the real world, then what is the Matrix to Neo at that point? It's a simulation in which everyone who only knows the Matrix thinks that is real world, and that everything that's in the Matrix is really what they should be concerned about. And yeah, I guess that's just it, is how does Neo feel about the life he lived in the Matrix now? What is the relationship of those people to the Matrix? And you look at everyone is just playing around in this simulation, and it's just, they think that it's real. They think that it's real life. And I guess that's just kind of the absurdity. That's what enlightenment is. And I can relate this to an experience I had when I used to play a lot of video games as a teenager, and I played this one game of Civilization 3, Sid Meier's Civilization, and I used to like to play with the biggest map, the slowest movement of time, and on every civilization was on an archipelago. So we're all on these little islands very far from each other, so it takes ages for us to develop. And I had put hundreds of hours into this one game of Civilization. I had done so much. I'd gone through all the different eras of building up my civilization. I'd contacted a few others, but there was still mostly, there was still so many civilizations over the map, so much work still to go, and we'd arrived in the modern era. And at some point I just realized, whoa, what am I doing? this is pointless. It was like everything, I'd invested so much in it, feeling the inherent meaningfulness of the game. I was so invested in the game, as you get with a video game, that you lose that sense that it's just a game. And something amazing happens then. I just felt this, like, what have I been doing? What is the point? And I never played that game again. And there was something in that moment, and I guess that is, if you took that as a microcosm of my entire life, if that happened with me my entire life, that would be enlightenment. Like, to feel that everything that I'm doing, everything in real life, all the way I interact with people, the things that I'm working on day to day, the overarching curvature of my life, the shape that my life is taking, if I was to realize that all that was just a game, that it I guess I can relate it over to Albert Camus talking about absurdism, or Jean-Paul Sartre talking about nausea, and it's just the nausea is the realization of, like, meaninglessness, of just being like, and it's this thing of, well, what's the point? And so looking at life in that sense, looking at everything that happens in your life and just being like, it's lost its grasp for me. It's lost it's not gripping me anymore. I'm not invested in that game. I've put so many 100 hours into it, so many years into it, and you just go, oh yeah, well that doesn't matter. That was actually an unimportant thing. It doesn't hold me anymore. And that's the thing, is that it's such a subtle emotional switch to realize you were playing a game, to realize you were playing a role within the Matrix, and then you wake up and you go, oh, what was I doing? And that's where enlightenment is liberation, because you're no longer invested in the game. Everybody else is just playing a character, and I guess it's coupled with a realization that the game will inevitably end, that everyone will eventually become enlightened, because it's inevitable. And I guess there's still the mystery around that. Jed McKenna seems to be invested in some ideas of reincarnation, but even you think death as being, well, what happens after death, and what is this? I mean, it still raises so many questions about the mystery of being, but just that idea of enlightenment is just to realize that everything that you're doing in your life is a joke, it's merely an actor playing a role. And if you were to set aside that role, then that is what liberation is. You're not bound by any morality at that point. You're not bound by any, expectations of what the enlightened person should look like. At that point, you just go, well, it's a game. It's like people when they first learn to lucid dream, it's like, what do? You know what I mean? You have a bit of fun with it. You play around with it. And I guess that's the thing with real life. If you became enlightened, you would just be, you would just play around with it, I guess. And what you'd become, you've no obligation to teach, as Jed McKenna says. It's just because he has an inclination towards it, but many of the other enlightened people don't go around teaching. It's not like it's an obligation. There are no obligations, because what's the point in teaching someone about how to get out of the Matrix? And when inevitably they will, and it's probably, here's the other thing about becoming enlightened, is that it's miserable. It's an incredibly tough process, because it's setting aside all things that you've got an enjoyment of, an attachment to, a love for in your life. And I guess this ties in with what Jesus is talking about, where you have to kill your parents and kill your family and kill your friends to follow him. And yeah, I guess that's the thing with enlightenment is you have to end all parts in this game. You have to end your relationship with it. And I guess for me, as I covered in that Why I'm Not Enlightened videos, that I'm still very much enamored with the game. I still love this world. I still love the people around me. I still love what I'm doing with my life. And yeah, as Jed McKenna says, it's life is this great theme park. There's roller coaster rides, and they go up and down, and someone who wants to enlighten the entire world is talking about coming in and flatten out the roller coasters. And he says, well, what's the point? You leave the theme park eventually anyway, so what are you doing you're undermining the point of a theme park by coming in and leveling out all the curves. And that's where the life negation. So Nietzsche talks a lot about the saying yes to life and the life affirming versus life denying philosophies. And life denying philosophies kind of say, no, we want to level out the roller coasters. We want to make this look as little like a theme park as possible. Whereas to see that it's all a game and yet to affirm it and to love it, to know this is pointless, but to affirm it. And I guess that's the absurdism of Camus, is to imagine Sisyphus. So this is in his book, The Myth of Sisyphus, and Sisyphus is an ancient Greek character. I guess hero is a bit of a stretch, mythological character, we'll call him anyway, and his punishment in Hades, in the underworld, is to roll this great boulder up the hill and to see it roll all the way back down, and then he walks back down and rolls it back up again. And Camus says we should imagine Sisyphus walking down the hill with a smile on his face, despite the fact that he's going through the motions, repeating the same act day in, day out, constantly, and there's no meaning to it, there's no end to it. And obviously that's his map over onto life. That's the absurd thing that we're doing here with life. But he says, let's imagine Sisyphus with a smile on his face as he's walking back down. You create your own meaning. You find your own joy in it. You enjoy the game. You enjoy life as it is and the absurdity that it is. And you affirm that and you say, well, this is the roller coaster, and we're here for a roller coaster. Let's do the roller coaster. And so everything that happens in your life, every error you make, every bit of shame you feel, every guilt you feel for something you should have done, every bit of pleasure you feel, every drop of love that permeates through your life, it's all just part of this theme park. It's all just part of this roller coaster, and it's all probably pointless. It's all probably just, in Plato's analogy of the cave, you're staring at the wall, you're looking at reflections on the wall, getting yourself worked up over it, and the reflections that are cast on the wall are just from a fire, and outside this cave there is the true sun and there's the true world, and we're all inevitably going back there. We're all going to die. We're all going to experience that disillusion and rejoining with the great plane of being. So while we're in here, while we're in this absurd play and theme park, might as well experience it to the fullness. And so I guess I've talked as much there about why not to become enlightened as about what enlightenment is. But enlightenment is just the realization that this is just a stage. This is just a play in which we're all taking this game of Civilization 3 too seriously. We're all just invested in a game. And at some point we will wake up. At some point that will become absurd to us. And at that point, that's fine. We'll say, well, that was the game. I enjoyed it while it lasted, or didn't enjoy it while it lasted. And so it goes, c'est la vie. That's what it's all about. So if you want to become enlightened, I guess you just gotta shear that connection between you and this stage, this matrix that we're living in. The trick with enlightenment, of course, is that it's quite hard to even do it. So I'm talking theoretically here about what enlightenment is. But how do you become enlightened? And that's again where I'd refer to that Sri Ramakrishna saying that you should seek illumination like a man whose head is on fire seeks a pond. It's only when you're sick of the game. Like, I couldn't have adhered that sense of absurdity with the game of Civilization 3. I was invested in it as long as I was invested in it. And it was only when the scales fell before my eyes that I was able to go, whoa, what am I doing here? What's the point of this? And so how could I have cultivated that? Why would I have cultivated? But how could I have cultivated that? And that's where Jed McKenna's spiritual autolysis comes in, I guess. But I think really you need that inner spark of truth, that inner spark of the need for truth, the thirst. It's got to be a hunger in you, not a hunger for the status that might come with being enlightened or being on the path and being the noble one who's more spiritually, the status that comes from higher spirituality. That's not going to cut it, because that's all just bullshit for within the game. That's not going to get you to enlightenment. It's only that the turmoil and dissatisfaction with what's going on within the play that's going to get you out of it. So you don't really have to worry about becoming enlightened, because you're on the path when you need to be on the path, and otherwise it's there. I mean, why follow something that you don't actually have the thirst to follow? If you want to become spiritually status driven, then maybe turn towards mysticism, turns towards experiencing higher states of consciousness and getting those MDMA kind of buzzes, getting those acid visions. I mean, that might be the path you want to go towards, experiencing higher spirituality. And it seems like it'd be a lot of fun. That seems like there'd be a lot of like cool insights along the way, but that's different to enlightenment. Enlightenment is something other. Enlightenment is realizing that even all that stuff is just an absurdity. All of that stuff is just another distraction. It's another enamorment with the field of the matrix. And so, yeah, if you want to become enlightened, you will become enlightened, because it's not something, it's probably driven by not wanting to be trapped by the matrix, rather than actually seeking the way out. So I don't think it's a noble quest of, I will go and do this, because the thing that drives that kind of energy is the sphere in which we're living. So yeah, I think enlightenment is such a basic thing, really, isn't it? It's just waking up. And it makes sense for me of that thing that people are always talking about. Just wake up. Just wake up. So that's everything that I wanted to share today on the subject of enlightenment. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please remember to give us a thumbs up down below, and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'd love to hear from you down in the comments if you have anything to add, any insights, any questions. And otherwise, I shall see you next time, guys. Thank you for watching.